The massive space station called Harmony's Edge floated in the darkness between star systems. Inside its crystal walls, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what many believed would be their final meeting. The war was lost, and everyone knew it. Taemin Park walked through the corridors of the station, his simple human clothing looking plain next to the advanced suits and natural armor of other species. He carried a basic tablet while others had floating holographic displays. Some aliens pointed at him and whispered. To them, humans were still new to space travel, barely worth noticing. The main meeting hall was enormous. Hundreds of beings from different worlds sat in chairs designed for their various body types. At the front, Chancellor Velnara stood tall. Her crystal-like skin reflected the lights in the room as she spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. The situation grows worse each day, she said. The Void Hunters have taken another 12 star systems this month. Our fleets cannot stop them. Taemin took his seat in the back corner, the section reserved for newer species. Around him sat representatives from worlds that had recently joined the coalition. None of them had much military power to offer. Admiral Kexmore appeared next to the Chancellor. The Nethys looked like a being made of pure energy, his form shifting and glowing as he spoke. Our latest engagement at Rigel 7 was a disaster. We lost 43 ships. The Hunters lost only 5. A murmur went through the crowd. These were not good numbers. How is this possible? Asked a delegate from the Outer Rim. Your weapons are the most advanced in the galaxy. Kexmore's energy form dimmed slightly. That is the problem. The Hunters learned too quickly. In the first hour of battle, our plasma weapons work perfectly. By the second hour, their bioarmor has adapted. Our energy shields become useless when they figure out the frequency. Taemin listened carefully as more reports came in. The pattern was always the same. The coalition forces would attack with their best technology. They would have early success. Then the Hunters would adapt and the battle would turn into a massacre. The Luxari had energy weapons that could cut through any normal armor. The Nethys could move through space at incredible speeds. The Corvani, ancient machine beings, had computers that could calculate every possible battle outcome. But none of it mattered anymore. The Hunters are not just alien, explained Dr. Yillith, a scientist from the core worlds. They are biomechanical organisms that can change their physical structure during battle. What kills them once will never kill them again. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The coalition's greatest strength, their advanced, predictable technology, had become their weakness. Chancellor Velnara looked around the room with her crystal eyes. We must face reality. Our military advisors recommend a full evacuation of the Outer Rim. We will fall back to the core worlds and hope the Hunters stop expanding. How many worlds will we abandon? Asked someone from the middle of the room. Approximately 400 inhabited systems, Velnara replied quietly. The number hit the room like a physical blow. 400 worlds meant billions of lives. Some species would lose their entire civilization. We need more time to evacuate, said Admiral Kexmore. Even with our fastest ships, moving that many people will take years. Time we do not have, replied Velnara. Hunter fleets move faster than our evacuation ships. We estimate they will reach the core worlds in 18 months. Taemin watched as panic spread through the room. Representatives began talking over each other, some demanding impossible solutions, others already planning their species' escape routes. What about the defense platforms? Called out a Corvani delegate, his mechanical voice cutting through the noise. The Hunters adapted to our defensive systems 3 months ago, Kexmore answered. Static defenses are useless now. New weapons research? Every prototype we test, they adapt to within days. Our scientists believe the Hunters can somehow share their adaptations across their entire species instantly. The room grew quiet again. Everyone was thinking the same thing. How do you fight an enemy that learns from every attack and never makes the same mistake twice? Chancellor Velnara looked toward the back of the room where the newer species sat. Before we finalize evacuation plans, we should hear from our latest coalition members. Perhaps you have resources that could assist in the relocation efforts. One by one, the representatives of minor species stood up. The Theta Centaurians offered their cargo ships. The Kepler colonists could provide temporary housing on their empty worlds. Each contribution was small but appreciated. Finally, Velnara's gaze reached Taemin. Ambassador Park, what can humanity offer to help with the evacuation? Taemin stood up slowly. Around him, hundreds of advanced beings turned to look at the human. Some had never seen one of his species before. Others had heard that humans were still using primitive chemical rockets until recently. Chancellor Velnara, Taman said in his calm voice, "I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly. Please." "Go ahead," she replied. "The hunters win because they adapt to your weapons and tactics during battle. Your advanced technology becomes predictable, so they learn to counter it." "That is correct. And you believe the only solution is to run away and hope they stop chasing you." Some beings in the room shifted uncomfortably. When put that way, the evacuation plan sounded cowardly. "We prefer to call it a strategic withdrawal," Admiral Kexmore said defensively. Taman nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Well, I have discussed this situation with my government back on Earth. The United Earth Federation has made a decision about our participation in these events. We appreciate any ships you can spare for evacuation duties," Velnara said kindly. "Actually," Taman replied, "we're not joining your evacuation." The room became very quiet. Several aliens looked confused. Taman took a breath and spoke clearly so everyone could hear him. "The United Earth Federation is joining the war." For a moment, nobody moved. Then the room exploded into noise. Aliens were talking, shouting, and making various sounds of disbelief. Some laughed. Others looked concerned for the humans' mental health. Chancellor Velnara raised her hand for silence. "Ambassador Park, I think there has been some misunderstanding. This is not a conflict your species is equipped to handle." "With respect, Chancellor, I disagree." Admiral Kexmore's energy form flickered with what might have been amusement. "Human weapons are chemical-based projectiles and primitive explosives. Your ships have no energy shields. You would be destroyed in the first engagement." Taman smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Admiral, has it occurred to you that maybe the problem is not that the hunters are too adaptable? Maybe the problem is that you're too predictable?" The room fell silent again. "We've been fighting wars on Earth for thousands of years," Taman continued. "We've learned something that you apparently have not. The key to winning is not having the best weapons. The key to winning is being impossible to predict." He looked around the room at all the advanced beings staring at him. "In 3 weeks, the first human fleet will arrive at Corinth Prime. We're going to show you how humans fight wars." 3 weeks later, the human fleet arrived at Corinth Prime exactly when Ambassador Taman had promised. Admiral Zafira of the Luxari watched from her command ship as the Earth vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. "By the crystal spirits," she whispered to her tactical officer. "What are those things?" The human ships looked nothing like the sleek, curved vessels of the Coalition. They were boxy and angular, covered in strange bumps and antenna arrays. Most shocking of all, they appeared to be made of simple metal instead of advanced materials. 47 ships, reported her officer. No energy signatures from plasma weapons. No shield generators that we can detect. Their hulls appear to be steel? Admiral Zafira felt a mix of admiration and horror. These humans were either incredibly brave or completely insane. Possibly both. General Wu Jin Li commanded the human fleet from his flagship, a heavy cruiser called the Busan Thunder. Unlike the spacious, elegant bridges of coalition ships, the human command center was cramped and filled with screens, buttons, and what appeared to be actual paper charts. "General," called out his communications officer, Lieutenant Yura Nam. "The Luxari Admiral is requesting to speak with you." "Put her through," Wu Jin replied. Admiral Zafira's crystal face appeared on the main screen. "General Lee, I must protest this action. Our scouts report a hunter swarm approaching this system. You should withdraw immediately." "How many hunter ships?" Wu Jin asked calmly. "Approximately 120 bioships. General, your fleet cannot possibly survive such an engagement." Wu Jin smiled. "Admiral, we didn't come here to survive. We came here to fight." Before Zafira could respond, alarms began blaring on both fleets. The hunters had arrived. The enemy ships dropped out of their bio-jump drives like a plague of insects. Each vessel was a living creature, grown rather than built. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms and weapon pods extended from their sides like arms. "Hunter fleet detected," reported Lieutenant Nam. 118 ships, moving to attack formation. "All ships," Wu Jin announced over the fleet communications. "This is what we trained for. Remember the plan? There is no plan. Every captain fights their own battle. Confuse the hell out of them." Admiral Zafira watched in amazement as the human fleet scattered in all directions. This was not how space battles worked. Fleets were supposed to maintain formation, provide mutual support, follow coordinated attack patterns. The hunters seemed equally confused. Their bioships began adapting their formation to counter what they expected to be a standard coalition attack. But the humans were not following any standard pattern. Captain Bo Young Kim commanded the destroyer Soul's Vengeance, one of the smaller human ships. As hunter vessels moved to intercept her, she did something no coalition captain would ever consider. She accelerated directly toward the largest enemy ship. "Captain," called her weapons officer, "recommend we maintain distance and use our missiles." "Negative," Bo Young replied. "Load the railguns with depleted uranium rounds. We're going in close." The hunter bioship extended its energy-absorbing tentacles, a defense that had proven effective against coalition plasma weapons. But when the Soul's Vengeance opened fire, the tentacles found nothing to absorb. Instead, dense metal projectiles traveling at incredible speed punched straight through the organic armor. The hunter ship immediately began adapting, growing thicker armor plating where the rounds had hit. Bo Young watched this process with interest. "Fascinating," she said. "Load high-explosive rounds. Let's see how they adapt to this." The next volley consisted of shells that exploded inside the hunter ship after penetrating its hull. The biovessel tried to grow internal barriers to contain explosions, but this left it vulnerable to the third volley, armor-piercing rounds that went straight through the weakened internal structure. "Now load incendiary rounds," Bo Young ordered. Her weapons officer looked confused. "Captain, the previous rounds were already effective." "That's the point," she replied. "Keep them guessing." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human captains employed tactics that made no sense to anyone watching. Commander Hyunwoo Shin rammed his corvette directly into a hunter ship, detonating nuclear charges at point-blank range. Captain Min Kyung Lee used her ship's industrial mining lasers, not even proper weapons, to cut through enemy hulls. The most confusing human tactic involved Captain Dong-Soo Park, who appeared to be running away from the battle. Hunter ships gave chase only to discover he was leading them into a minefield his ship had been secretly laying during its retreat. "This is impossible," Admiral Zafira said to her tactical officer. "How are they winning?" Her officer studied the readouts. "The hunters are trying to adapt to human weapons, but the humans keep changing their weapons. Each ship is using completely different ammunition types, and they switch them randomly." "But that makes no tactical sense," Zafira protested. "If a weapon is effective, you should continue using it." The humans don't seem to agree with that philosophy. General Wu Jin watched the battle from his command chair with satisfaction. The hunters had adapted their bioarmor to resist depleted uranium rounds, only to be hit with tungsten projectiles. When they adapted to tungsten, the humans switched to explosive rounds. When they grew thicker armor to stop explosions, humans used armor-piercing rounds to go through the thick plating. "General," reported Lieutenant Nam, "the hunter fleet is beginning to retreat." Wu Jin nodded. "Let them go. We've made our point. Sir, shouldn't we pursue and destroy them?" "No. We want them to report back to their command structure. We want them to be confused." As the hunter ships fled the system, Admiral Zafira contacted General Wu Jin again. "General, I must ask, how did you know that would work?" Wu Jin looked thoughtful. "Admiral, your people fight wars like scientists conducting experiments. You test a hypothesis, gather data, and refine your approach. Very logical, very predictable. And humans fight differently. Humans fight wars like artists creating paintings. Every battle is different. Every commander has their own style. We change our approach not because the old one failed, but because we get bored using the same technique twice." Admiral Zafira tried to process this concept. "But how do you coordinate such chaos?" "We don't," Wu Jin replied simply. "That's what makes it work." Over the next several days, word of the human victory spread throughout Coalition space. For the first time in 3 years, a Coalition fleet had defeated the hunters without losing a single ship. But the victory came with disturbing questions. The humans had used tactics that violated every principle of modern warfare. They had succeeded through what could only be described as organized insanity. In the Coalition military academies, professors struggled to explain what had happened at Corinth Prime. How could primitive weapons defeat adaptive biotechnology? How could chaos triumph over evolution? The answer, though few wanted to admit it, was simple. The hunters had spent years learning to counter logical, predictable opponents. They had never encountered an enemy that won battles by being impossible to understand. General Wu Jin ended his report to Earth Command with a single sentence. The galaxy is about to learn that humans don't fight wars to make sense. We fight wars to win. News of the human victory at Corinth Prime spread across the galaxy, faster than anyone expected. In coalition command centers, military analysts struggled to understand how primitive human weapons had defeated the adaptive hunter fleet. More disturbing was the fact that no coalition species could replicate the human tactics. Captain Dongha Choi stood in the airlock of his ship, the Incheon Striker, preparing for what coalition observers called the most insane military operation they had ever witnessed. Through the transparent barrier, he could see the massive hunter bioship floating in space like a living asteroid. "Captain," said his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sujin Kang, "the coalition admirals are requesting we wait for backup before attempting this boarding action." Dongha checked his equipment one more time. Unlike the advanced combat suits used by other species, his gear looked almost primitive. Chemical explosive charges, kinetic firearms, and what appeared to be simple metal tools. "Tell the admirals that if we wait for backup, the hunters will adapt to our approach," he replied. "We're going in now while they're still confused." Admiral Zephyra watched from her command ship as 20 human soldiers launched themselves across open space toward the hunter vessel. No energy shields protected them. No advanced propulsion systems guided their flight. They used simple rocket packs and raw courage. "This is suicide," she told her tactical officer. "Hunter bioships have internal defense systems specifically designed to kill boarding parties. Should we prepare rescue ships?" The officer asked. "For what? There won't be anything left to rescue." Inside the hunter ship, Captain Dongha and his team moved through corridors that pulsed like the inside of a living creature. The walls secreted acid designed to dissolve coalition energy suits. But the simple materials of human combat gear proved surprisingly resistant. "Contact front," called Sergeant Hyojin Lee as hunter defensive organisms dropped from the ceiling. These creatures had evolved specifically to counter coalition boarding tactics, energy-absorbing tentacles, plasma-resistant carapaces, and adaptive combat programming. The human response was immediate and effective. Instead of using energy weapons, they opened fire with chemically propelled projectiles. The hunter organisms tried to adapt their defensive systems, but bullets followed by grenades followed by flamethrowers created a sequence of threats too rapid and varied for biological adaptation. "Move forward," ordered Dongha. "Plant charges on anything that looks important." Dr. Hae-Jin Song, the human xenobiologist assigned to study hunter technology, watched the boarding action from the coalition observation ship. Around her, alien scientists stared in amazement at the tactical displays. "Impossible," muttered Dr. Yilith, the Luxari researcher. "Those organisms were specifically evolved to counter boarding actions." "How are the humans succeeding?" He-Jin smiled. "You've been thinking about this war wrong. You see adaptation as biological perfection. We see it as a weakness to exploit." "I don't understand." "Adaptation requires prediction," He-Jin explained. "The hunters study your attacks, then evolve specific counters. But you can't adapt to random chaos. You can't evolve a defense against an enemy that doesn't follow any pattern." She pointed to the display showing human soldiers inside the hunter ship. "Watch Captain Choi's team. They're not following any standard boarding procedure. One moment they're using explosives, the next they're fighting with combat knives. They switch tactics every 30 seconds. Dr. Yilith observed the human actions with growing understanding. The hunters are trying to adapt. But by the time they grow a defense against one attack method, the humans have already switched to something completely different." "Exactly. We call it tactical ADHD. Our military commanders have the attention span of caffeinated squirrels, and it drives our enemies insane." Meanwhile, Admiral Namsu Yu was coordinating a much larger operation in the Vega system. 3 coalition fleets had gathered to defend against a massive hunter assault, and the human admiral was supposed to provide support. Instead, he was giving the coalition commanders headaches. "Admiral Yu," called Captain Thexstar of the Nethys fleet, "your ships are completely out of formation. We need coordinated assault patterns to maximize our firepower." Namsu looked at the tactical display from his flagship, the Soul Liberator. The coalition ships were arranged in perfect geometric formations, each fleet positioned to provide maximum mutual support and overlapping fields of fire. Captain Thextar, Namsu replied. With respect, your perfect formations are exactly what the hunters expect. They've adapted to coordinated attacks. Then what do you suggest? Watch and learn. Namsu opened communications to his fleet. All ships commence random attack pattern Omega. Remember, if what you're doing makes sense, you're doing it wrong. The coalition officers watched in bewilderment as human ships scattered across the battlefield, with no apparent coordination. Some vessels engaged in long-range missile duels. Others closed to point-blank range for kinetic weapon attacks. One ship, commanded by Captain Ginny Park, actually began retreating while firing weapons backward. This is chaos, protested Admiral Zafira. How can you coordinate mutual support with such random positioning? We don't coordinate, Namsu explained calmly. Each ship fights independently. Each captain makes their own decisions. The only rule is that if the enemy starts to predict your actions, you change them immediately. When the hunter fleet arrived, their bioships moved into standard counter formation designed to neutralize coalition tactics. But there were no coalition tactics to counter. The human ships were everywhere and nowhere, attacking from unexpected angles with weapons that changed every few minutes. Hunter bioships tried to adapt to long-range missile attacks, only to be surprised by short-range ramming actions. When they adapted to kinetic weapons, humans switched to chemical explosives. When they grew armor against explosives, humans used mining lasers stolen from asteroid processing ships. Captain Subin commanded the destroyer Guangzhou's Fury using what she called the dance of beautiful violence. Her ship moved through the battle space in patterns that followed no military doctrine, spiraling. Attacks followed by sudden stops, feints toward one target followed by strikes against completely different enemies. Captain, called her weapons officer, the hunter ships are trying to predict our movement patterns. Then it's time to change the dance, Subin replied. Switch to pattern Delta, the one where we pretend to be drunk. Admiral Namsu watched with satisfaction as hunter ships became increasingly frantic in their attempts to adapt. Their biological evolution was fast, but it required time to analyze threats and develop counters. Against enemies that never used the same threat twice, adaptation became impossible. Admiral, reported his communications officer, the hunter fleet is retreating. Let them go, Namsu ordered. We want them to report back that human tactics cannot be predicted or countered. After the battle, coalition military leaders gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. The humans had won another victory, but their methods seemed to violate every principle of advanced warfare. I still don't understand how this works, admitted Captain Thextar. Your tactics appear completely random. General Wu Jin, who had arrived to observe the battle, smiled. That's because you're trying to find logic in chaos. Human warfare isn't random. It's creatively unpredictable. What's the difference? Random means no pattern at all. Creatively unpredictable means every pattern is possible, but none of them repeat. Our commanders are artists, not scientists. Every battle is a new masterpiece. Dr. Haya Jin added, You've been fighting the hunters with mathematics. We fight them with imagination. They can adapt to math. They can't adapt to dreams. As reports of human victories continued to reach coalition headquarters, a new understanding began to emerge. The galaxy's most advanced species had lost the war because they had become too advanced. Their perfected tactics had become predictable. Humans won because they had never perfected anything. Every human commander fought differently. Every human ship used different weapons. Every human battle followed different rules. The hunters, masters of adaptation, had encountered something they could not adapt to. The beautiful, terrible chaos of human creativity applied to warfare, and across the galaxy, for the first time in 3 years, coalition forces began to hope that the war might actually be winnable. The Coalition Council Chamber had been rebuilt since Ambassador Taemin's first visit. The old formal seating arrangement was gone, replaced by a more practical setup that allowed for rapid communication during military emergencies. Taemin stood before the assembled representatives, but this time, everyone was listening carefully. Honored delegates, he began. 6 months ago, you asked what humanity could contribute to this war. Today, I want to explain not just what we've done, but why it works. Chancellor Velnara leaned forward in her crystal chair. The human victories had surprised everyone, but the coalition leadership needed to understand the principles behind them. Please continue, Ambassador. Taman activated a simple holographic display, far less advanced than coalition technology, but effective. Images of human military history appeared in the air above the assembly. My people have been fighting wars for over 10,000 years, he said. Not against aliens, but against each other. We have perfected the art of war not through superior technology, but through necessity and survival. The display showed ancient human battles, warriors with swords, soldiers with muskets, tanks crossing battlefields, aircraft dropping bombs. To the advanced alien species watching, it looked primitive and brutal. Every few hundred years, humans develop new ways to kill each other, Taman continued. But we never forget the old ways. A human commander today might use orbital bombardment in the morning and sword charges in the afternoon. Dr. Yillith raised a crystalline hand. Ambassador, surely you're exaggerating. Modern warfare doesn't include sword attacks. Taman smiled. Dr. Yillith, would you like to meet Colonel Minho Park? He led a ground assault on Hunter-occupied Kepler Prime last week. His opening attack involved what he called a proper bayonet charge backed by nuclear artillery. Murmurs went through the assembly. The combination of primitive melee weapons and advanced explosives seemed impossible. Fleet Admiral Sujin Kang appeared on the communication screen from her flagship. Her uniform was dirty and torn from recent combat, and there was a bandage on her forehead. Greetings, coalition leaders, she said with a slight bow. Ambassador Taman asked me to demonstrate our strategic doctrine. Please proceed, Admiral, Chancellor Velnara replied. Sujin activated her own display, showing a recent battle at Wolf 359. We call our approach beautiful violence. Every engagement is treated as a work of art where creativity matters more than efficiency. The battle recording showed human ships attacking a hunter fleet using dozens of different tactical approaches simultaneously. Some vessels fought like ancient naval ships, trading broadsides at close range. Others used hit-and-run tactics learned from historical cavalry charges. Still others employed what appeared to be boxing strategies adapted for space combat. As you can see, Sujin explained, each ship follows a different military tradition. Captain Lee uses techniques from ancient Korean naval warfare. Commander Rodriguez employs what she calls Aztec space tactics. Captain Okafor fights like his ancestors did in medieval African kingdoms, but with missile launchers. Admiral Kexmore's energy form flickered with confusion. How do you coordinate such diverse approaches? We don't, Sujin replied. That's the beauty of it. Each commander is an independent artist creating their own masterpiece. The enemy cannot predict what we'll do because we don't know what we'll do until we do it. The coalition observers watched more battle footage. In one scene, a human destroyer executed what could only be described as a barrel roll while firing weapons in all directions. In another, a heavy cruiser played what appeared to be music over its communication system while launching coordinated attacks timed to the rhythm. Is that ship dancing? Asked a Corvani delegate. Captain Seo Young Kim calls it combat ballet, Sujin confirmed. She choreographs her attacks like dance performances. Very effective and completely impossible to predict. Taman resumed his presentation. What you must understand is that humans don't just have one military strategy. We have thousands, developed across countless wars on our home planet. The display showed examples of human military thinking throughout history, strategies from ancient China mixed with tactics from medieval Europe, Native American guerrilla warfare combined with Roman formation fighting, African tribal combat merged with modern special operations. Every human culture developed its own way of war, Taman explained. When we unified our planet, we didn't choose one approach and abandon the others. We kept them all. Colonel Minho Park joined the communication from the surface of Kepler Prime, where smoke was still rising from recent combat. His armor was scorched, and he carried what appeared to be both a plasma rifle and an ancient sword. Honored coalition leaders, he said with a tired smile, I want to tell you about yesterday's ground assault. Please proceed, Colonel, Chancellor Velnara said. The Hunter ground forces had adapted to our previous tactics. Their bioarmor could resist our energy weapons, and their defensive positions countered our standard assault patterns. So we tried something different. The display showed human soldiers charging across an open field toward Hunter positions, but this was not a normal military assault. The humans were shouting, singing, and wielding close combat weapons alongside modern firearms. I led my troops in what my ancestors would recognize as a traditional warrior charge. Minho continued. But we backed it with orbital bombardment, combat drones, and electronic warfare. The hunters had adapted to expect logical military tactics. They were not prepared for berserkers with rocket launchers. The footage showed hunter bioforms trying desperately to adapt to human attacks that made no tactical sense. Human soldiers would fire missiles one moment, then drop their weapons and attack with knives the next. Some troops sang ancient war songs while others maintained radio silence. A few units followed strict military discipline while others fought with what could only be called joyful chaos. How do you train soldiers for such diverse approaches? Asked Admiral Kexmore. Colonel Minho grinned. We tell them to fight like their great-grandparents would have fought, but with better weapons. Every human carries the warrior traditions of their ancestors. We just give them permission to use them. Dr. Haya Jin Song appeared on another communication screen from her research station. I've been studying the psychological effects of human tactics on hunter bioforms, she announced. The results are fascinating. Her display showed brain scans of captured hunter organisms. The hunter collective consciousness works by sharing adaptation data across their entire species. When they encounter a new threat, they analyze it, develop a counter, and share that solution instantly. And this doesn't work against humans? Asked Dr. Yillith. It works too well, Yijin replied. The hunters are trying to adapt to every human tactic simultaneously. Ancient sword fighting, modern missile attacks, medieval cavalry charges, futuristic energy weapons, they're trying to evolve. Counters to 10,000 years of human military. Development all at once, the display showed hunter bioforms literally tearing themselves apart as they tried to grow defensive features for incompatible threats. Armor designed to stop swords interfered with systems meant to deflect energy blasts. Organs evolved to counter chemical weapons conflicted with adaptations for kinetic projectiles. The hunters are experiencing what we might call evolutionary confusion, Yijin continued. They cannot adapt to chaos because adaptation requires patterns. Human warfare has no consistent patterns because we've never agreed on how wars should be fought. Ambassador Taemin concluded his presentation with a simple statement. Honorable delegates, you asked humanity to help evacuate your worlds. Instead, we're winning your war, not because we're stronger or smarter than you, but because we're too stubborn and too creative to fight the same way twice. Chancellor Velnara spoke for the entire assembly. Ambassador Taemin, on behalf of the coalition, I must ask, are you willing to teach us these methods? Taemin looked around the room at the hundreds of advanced beings who had initially dismissed his species as primitive. Chancellor, we're not teachers. We're artists. But if you want to learn the art of beautiful violence, we'll be happy to show you how it's done. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the hunter invasion began, the coalition had hope. Not hope based on superior technology or logical strategy, but hope based on the magnificent, terrible, wonderful unpredictability of human creativity applied to warfare. 1 year after humanity joined the war, the galaxy looked completely different. The hunter advance had not just stopped. It had been pushed back to their home system. Admiral J-Ho Lim stood on the bridge of the massive coalition flagship Indomitable Soul, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for the final assault. Admiral, reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Yejin Ko, all coalition forces report ready. 2,000 ships from 47 species all awaiting your orders. J-Ho studied the tactical display with satisfaction. This was not the desperate evacuation fleet that had been planned a year ago. This was an army of liberation, and at its heart were tactical principles that had once seemed impossible. Admiral J-Ho, came the voice of Chancellor Velnara over the communication system. The Coalition Council has authorized you to begin the final assault whenever you deem appropriate. Thank you, Chancellor, J-Ho replied. We begin in 10 minutes. Through the bridge windows he could see the massive hunter home system. Bioships by the thousands floated in defensive formations around their primary world, a living planet that pulsed with organic energy. This was the source of the hunter plague, the heart of their collective consciousness. But the fleet approaching this system was unlike anything the hunters had faced before. Luxari ships equipped with rapid-fire kinetic weapons flew alongside Nethys vessels that had been modified to ram targets at high speed. Corvani mechanical ships now carried primitive chemical explosives alongside their advanced computing systems. The coalition forces have learned well, observed Commander Park Ji-hoon from his station. Look at the Luxari formation. They're using random attack patterns instead of their traditional precise geometries. Jae-ho nodded. Teaching other species to fight like humans had been challenging, but the results were impressive. They understand now that perfection is the enemy of victory. Chaos is our greatest weapon. Ambassador Taemin appeared on the communication screen from the diplomatic vessel. Admiral, I've been in contact with Earth Command. They're very proud of what we've accomplished here. And what have we accomplished, Ambassador? Jae-ho asked with a slight smile. We've taught the galaxy how to be human, Taemin replied, at least when it comes to warfare. The final assault began exactly as planned, which meant it began with no plan at all. Admiral Jae-ho opened fleet communications and gave the simplest order in military history. All ships attack however you want. Remember, if the enemy expects it, don't do it. What followed was the most beautiful and terrible space battle ever recorded. 2,000 ships attacked the Hunter defenses using tactics that spanned the entire history of galactic warfare. Ancient ramming attacks mixed with modern missile barrages. Precision energy strikes followed by completely random explosions. Captain Sua Lee commanded the destroyer Busan Storm using what she called interpretive combat. Her ship moved through the battle space like a dancer, following patterns that existed only in her imagination. When Hunter bioships tried to predict her next move, she changed direction based on whatever music was playing on her personal audio system. Captain, called her weapons officer, the Hunter ships are trying to adapt to our movement pattern. Then it's time for a new song, Sua replied, switching her music from classical Korean traditional melodies to modern electronic dance tracks. Her ship's movement immediately became more aggressive and rhythmic. Meanwhile, Colonel Dong-wook Kim was leading the largest ground assault in galactic history on the Hunter homeworld. His troops had learned something important during their year of fighting. The key to beating adaptive enemies was to never stop adapting yourself. All units, he announced over the communication system, commence Operation Beautiful Chaos. Remember your training, fight like your ancestors would have fought, but with better weapons and absolutely no concern for making sense. Human soldiers charged across the living landscape of the Hunter world, using every combat technique in human history. Ancient formation fighting mixed with modern urban warfare. Medieval cavalry charges supported by orbital bombardment. Guerrilla tactics combined with full frontal assault. But most importantly, soldiers from other species had learned to fight like humans. Luxari warriors who had once relied on perfect coordination now fought with creative independence. Nethys troops abandoned their energy-based combat doctrine in favor of physical violence that their ancestors had practiced millions of years ago. Dr. Hai-jin Song watched the assault from her research station and provided real-time analysis to the fleet commanders. The Hunter collective consciousness is in complete chaos, she reported. They're trying to adapt to thousands of different tactical approaches simultaneously. On her screens, she could see the biomechanical processes of the Hunter organisms literally breaking down. Their adaptive systems were overloaded, trying to evolve counters to incompatible threats. Some Hunter bioships were growing armor designed to stop primitive spears while others were developing defenses against weapons that hadn't been used in the battle. They can't handle the cognitive load, she continued. Human tactics don't just defeat their defenses, they defeat their ability to think clearly. Admiral, Jae-ho watched the battle unfold with the calm satisfaction of someone who understood that victory was inevitable. Not because humans were superior fighters, but because they had taught the galaxy something profound about the nature of conflict. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Ye Jin-ko, Hunter resistance is collapsing across all fronts. Their homeworld defenses are failing. And the bioships? Many are retreating beyond the galactic rim. Others appear to be malfunctioning. Their adaptive systems seem to be stuck in feedback loops. Jae-ho nodded. This was exactly what human military theorists had predicted. An enemy that relied entirely on adaptation would be helpless against opponents who never stopped changing. The final phase of the battle lasted only 3 hours. When it ended, the Hunter threat had been effectively eliminated. Not destroyed but broken, their collective consciousness had shattered under the weight of trying to adapt to an enemy that was impossible to understand. Ambassador. Taemin addressed the Coalition fleet as they secured the Hunter home system. 1 year ago, you asked humanity what we could contribute to your evacuation efforts. Today, I can give you our final answer. His image appeared on screens throughout the massive fleet. Behind him, the living world of the Hunters pulsed weakly, its biomechanical defenses finally silent. We contributed something your advanced civilizations had forgotten. He continued. We contributed the understanding that progress doesn't always mean abandoning the old ways. Sometimes the most advanced technique is knowing when to use the most primitive one. Chancellor Velnara's response came from the Coalition Command Center. Ambassador Taemin, on behalf of all Coalition species, I must ask, what happens now? How do we prevent something like this from happening again? Taemin smiled. Chancellor, you don't prevent it. You prepare for it. The galaxy is a dangerous place, full of threats we haven't imagined yet. The key to surviving those threats is to never become too comfortable with any single approach to solving problems. In the months that followed, the Coalition established new military academies where officers from different species learned to fight like humans, not by copying human tactics, but by developing their own creative approaches to warfare. The course catalog at the primary academy included classes with titles like Applied Chaos Theory, The Art of Beautiful Violence and Why Military, Doctrine is the Enemy of Military, Victory. The most popular course was simply called How to Fight. Wars like you're personally offended by your enemy's existence. Human. Instructors taught alien students that the greatest military strategy was having no military strategy, that the best battle plan was the willingness to abandon any battle plan. That victory belonged not to the strongest or smartest, but to those who were too creative to be predicted and too stubborn to quit. Years later, when new threats emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies, they encountered a coalition that had learned humanity's greatest lesson. They found defenders who fought not with perfect technology or logical tactics, but with the magnificent, unpredictable creativity of species that had remembered how to be dangerous. The galaxy was safe, protected not by its most advanced civilizations, but by the understanding that advancement meant never forgetting how to be primitive when primitiveness was what victory required. And somewhere in human space, military academies continued to teach the most important lesson in the history of warfare. The enemy can adapt to anything except the beautiful chaos of opponents who fight like artists creating masterpieces of violence. The war was over. The real education had just begun.